And my first step into how should I approach this was to research the author. To no avail. The author has nothing to do with war, was not part of it. He is just a poet, and the bombing of Dresden wasn't even part of his biography on his page or any of his works. So that's when I just started analyzing how he wrote it and kind of things he may have focused on. One thing I found interesting is he starts off the poem, it was the night of Fasching. And Fasching is this Roman Catholic festival celebrated in German-speaking countries. And it happens on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. And the bombing of Dresden happened on February 13th, not even close to November 11th. So I took that as Robert Hedden, who's the author, him just telling us that it was a normal day. People were happy, celebrating life, they weren't expecting anything. Dresden, the town itself, is a historical town with little ties to the war, at least in comparison to the other major cities. And people did not expect it to be a target. It was kind of like wait, why is this happening? And the people who chose, the Allied forces who chose to attack Dresden, even regret it and distance themselves as much as possible from kind of, taking responsibility of the bombings themselves. And I mean, Churchill even he put pressure on everyone to pretty much the bombings of Dresden marked the stop of the just blanket bombing of cities. And the reason they were doing it is hoping to kind of cut Germany off economically and just terrorize them, hoping that they'd have an early surrender. Which it didn't really do it. It just killed a lot of people, and it was extremely destructive, as you can see. Dresden was considered one of the most beautiful cities because of its artistry, and people said it was very aesthetically pleasing. And the bombing itself killed about 35,000 to 135,000. They, to this day, don't know an exact number because there was no way to count the refugees within it. So the approach I took to kind of analyzing this poem and figuring out why he wrote it and what the purpose was behind it was to just go through every aspect of it. And the way he worded things, the history of the bombings of Dresden themselves. And I brought in a lot of kind of sources of people who see war as beautiful. And what I titled my paper was War is a Beautiful Hell. And there was one guy who kept describing war over and over in his book. War is the flowery field that is brought to life by orchids of machine guns. And it's kind of weird way to describe things that kind of sparks your interest, whoa, I like that paragraph, I think I'll read it again. And he keeps bringing in ways to describe war as beauty. But then he comes out and says it. War is beautiful to those who have not experienced it firsthand. But the individuals who have experienced it firsthand, they still see the savagery of it and the just grim darkness of war. And the family members that were affected by the bombing, who lost their mothers, brothers, wives, or lost their own lives, they can never come back from the black abyss that's death. They can't come back from that. And what Robert kept kind of conveying is that he takes something so destructive and make it beautiful, because the audience isn't part of it, the audience is observing it. And what the audience sees is a bright light show, and it captures, they're just oohs and ahs, and they're just this is wonderful. But they weren't part of it, so they don't see the true destruction in the lives that it's completely ruined. And so, I have some pictures here, and you can even see the beauty of the city before, and then how it's just pretty much flattened. And to this day, Dresden will never be the same, because when they rebuilt Dresden, it's very modern, not great museums or anything like that. It's just kind of modern buildings, just like any normal city. So when you're looking at the city, you don't really know the history unless you've already known it, but you don't really just see the history by looking at the city or visiting the city. And one way that Robert was trying to make a memory of the bombings of Dresden was some of his last lines talking about the snails gripping the dry walls of the cisterns that were fossilized. They turned to limestone overnight. That's his way of creating a memory of the bombings of Dresden for future generations. Because if you see a fossilized limestone snail, it kind of shows like a great disaster, because usually fossils come from just great disasters and they were preserved in a certain way for a certain amount of time. So even though Robert Hedden does a very good job of describing it as beautiful, war is still hell and war is still ugly. Anyone have any questions?